Title is Learning and Memory. Subtitle is Encoding, Storage and Retrieving of Information. Email address is here. First, what is learning is considered here. Usually we learn something inside classrooms and outside classrooms in some ways with which we are familiar. The mechanism might indicate the relation between memory and learning. In the acquisition, to understand and interpret some structures and what is indicated. To repeat some words, glass, doctor, ear. To use some structures, the man, Lisa, and Linda met. To examine some structures and meaning. The study of memory and learning arose from philosophical questions regarding how people come to know things about their world. Learning is assuredly the primary way we acquire knowledge, and remembering is the primary means by which people support knowledge claims, as when a witness in court asserted, "I remember seeing Jones with a revolver in his hand." Learning is defined as a relatively permanent change in behavior that occurs as a result of experience. There are two basic kinds of learning, non-associative learning and associative learning. Non-associative learning involves learning about a single stimulus, and it includes habituation and sensitization. Associative learning involves learning relationships among events. It includes classical conditioning and instrumental conditioning. Next, what is memory is almost observed. We have memory, but the sort of system and process is technically complicated as well. Encoding of information, storage of information, retrieving of information. The purely human side of science making can be divided into two separate but intertwined branches. One consists of making up and answering hard questions about the domain of interest. The most basic form of this kind of question is what is X, where X stands for any one of the very large number of words or expressions. In the science of memory, X could represent things such as accessibility, association, encoding, implicit memory, item, retriever, source amnesia, working memory, and a long string of others. Other forms of what questions arise in more closely circumscribed context, encoding of what, remembering of what. One can extend this series practically endlessly. Ebbinghaus research is fruitful, in which syllables are remembered and tested with meaning for time and repetitions in learning and memory. The ideas which are conceived in one act of consciousness or it is true all bind together, but not in the same way. The strength of the union is rather a decreasing function of the time or of the number of intervening memories. One needs but to say that, in the case of an unfamiliar sequence of syllables, only about 7 can be grasped in one act, but that with frequent repetition and gradually increasing familiarity with the series, this capacity of consciousness may be increased. So, for example, a series of 16 syllables, which have been thoroughly memorized, may be present in a single conscious act. In the case of movements, as of feelings, memory traces remain which, by repetition of the occurrences, are always more closely associated with each other. Bartlett's research is on remembering. We should say that a man is remembering only when he is definitely oriented toward his past life and is aware that he is trying to drag out of this some facts which were once present to sensory perception, but are not so longer. Such a view makes a strong distinction between perceiving, remembering, and imaging. Biologists, on the whole, have treated memory mainly as a repetitive function and have speedily become immersed in theories of how specific traces may be made and somehow excited. Philosophers have naturally tried to find how what is recalled is related to the real world and have discussed the validity of the information that is given by the query. Most of the more careful psychological work, especially that which has an experimental basis, has been concerned with special problems in the general field, for example, with a normal course of learning and forgetting. Tarobeng examines episodic memory and semantic memory, and propositional knowledge and procedural knowledge are indicated. It is the useful division in capturing language, logic, and symbol. Propositional knowledge can be sought every contemplated introspectively, attended to internally. Procedural knowledge cannot. Communication of knowledge retrieved from either the episodic or the semantic system to an external observer usually depends on the employment of natural language or some other symbol system. Procedural knowledge can be communicated through non-symbolic behavior. Access to or actualization of information in the episodic system tends to be deliberate and usually requires conscious effort, whereas in the semantic system it tends to be automatic. The general form of the retrieval query directed at the episodic system is "What did you do at time in place?" Doing referred to means cognitive activities, seeing, hearing, perceiving, imaging, thinking, as well as all sorts of overt behavior. Note that the query specifically refers to the person to whom it is directed. What did you do? Battery represents a short-term memory and working memory, which are presumably worked in terms of cognition. The attempt to develop information processing models of short-term memory led to some major controversies. Unfortunately, resolving these issues unequivocally proved beyond the capability of the method available at the time, resulting in the decline of interest in STM during the 1970s and subsequently even to the declaration of the demise. As the old concept of STM was losing favor, it became incorporated within the more complex framework Working Memory (WM), which proposed that the older concept of the unitary store be replaced by a multi-component system that utilized storage as part of its function of facilitating complex cognitive activities such as learning, comprehending, and reasoning. Learning is in the laborious process, especially it's noticed that there might be a difference between child learning and adult learning that includes tutor's impact, which are related with pedagogy as teaching. The child learns to imitate, and this learning process, like any other, raises all the problems involved in sensory motor and mental development. This conclusion would still be true even if it's the tendency to imitate there were an element transmitted through heredity, since a distinction must be made between a tendency and the technique which makes its development possible. It is clear from the outset that the problem of imitation is linked with that of representation, since representation involves the image of an object. It can be said to be a kind of interiorized imitation, and therefore a continuation of accommodation. Play in its initial stages being merely the pole of the behaviors defined by assimilation, almost all the behaviors we studied in relation to intelligence are susceptible of becoming prey as soon as they are repeated for mere assimilation. Begonias focus on the studying method in learning. The traditional method of studying concepts fall into two groups. Typical of the first group is the so-called method of definition, with its variations. It is used to investigate the already formed concept of the child through the verbal definition of their contents. Two important drawbacks make this method inadequate for studying the process in depth. In the first place, it deals with a finished product of concept formation. In the second place, this method, concentrating on the word, fails to take into account the perception and the mental elaboration of sensory material that give birth to the concept. The second group comprises methods used in the study of abstraction. They are concerned with the psychic processes leading to concept formations. The child is required to discover some common trait in a series of discrete impressions, abstracting it from all the other traits with which it is perceptually fused. Here are research questions. First, how are repetitions and imitations useful when learning is based on memory that functions as remembering and forgetting? Second, does self-consciousness in learning and reading and writing? Wallace and Hitchcock first pointed the value of exposure through reading to text in the target language so as to build a knowledge base of the rhetorical and linguistic properties of L2 writing system, knowledge that can then be transferred to writing. In this input-based perspective, while reading performs the same basic function for acquisition of L1 literacy, its importance is enhanced in the L2 context, where students have an especially strong need for exposure to the L2 in actual use. Indeed, transfer represents a major area of concentration in L2 literacy instruction and research, enabling learners to know how to access and make effective use of their L1 literacy repertoire and experiences, while reading and writing in the L2 is a key element in linking L2 reading and writing constructively. The learning and memory isn't one way but two-way. Obviously, remembering is learning and it's a memory that is encouraged against forgetting. However, learning itself retrieves memory, which refers to learning transfer. Pattern practice and stories that means one way might not be learning. What is learning will be based on the self-consciousness, especially many making little progress. Further investigation should be done in the process of outputting learning. Many strategies are taken in terms of input procedures. However, a creativity as a challenge in thinking of something and learning is under the deduction. Therefore, added information and knowledge are important. It's memory for learning. Such information appears in minds. We can advance learning more.